Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Bardcast. I am Chris, and I play Coriakin, and with me today, as always, is...
I'm Semi, and I play as Bingro.
And we're back again today to talk about something that we're both not as comfortable with, especially me, talking about music. We're talking about lyrics today, which is kind of a fascinating topic. Why did you choose to bring this one up? Because this was actually your idea.
Yeah, it was my idea because that's something that is an issue for me due to obvious language barriers, and there is some complexity to it. And over the last few weeks, I really saw that that there are certain parts that I struggle with when trying to set lyrics into music or writing lyrics to music.
So I have a question for you then. Do you find that you have the same issues when you're writing in German, or is it mainly in English?
That's an interesting question. I don't know, because I haven't tried writing lyrics for German music yet. So maybe I should try that sometime. But the problem is that if I write music for Landlord, nobody would understand, because the main folks there are from other countries and wouldn't understand any German. So that's a problem.
That's true, although maybe I'll ask you to write one at some point, because I would like to hear that. It brings up an interesting thought, though, which is that when you have a natural handicap, it almost sort of excuses not being perfect. I really struggled with lyrics for a long time because, this was my natural language. If something was wrong, I would know it was wrong, even if I didn't know how to necessarily fix it. Part of me wonders if having that little bit of being removed from what you know you can do might make it easier. Although, probably just harder.
Yeah, the problem is, at least for me, when I haven't been writing a lot with lyrics, but at least a few things. And I usually tend to write lyrics that are not very complex or deep and use simpler terms and structures in rather short phrases. So the language barrier certainly doesn't help me writing interesting lyrics. So I'll rather focus on the emotional part when writing them, and the emotional topic I choose.
That's an interesting way of putting it. So there's not necessarily anything wrong with writing a simple song or simple lyrics, but if you can't do anything other than that, it does limit the creative choices you can make, which can be a problem. I think I see where you're coming from here.
Yeah, I think there are two parts. One part certainly is the right choice of words, and the other part is that you have to stick to certain rules when writing lyrics. You'd like them to rhyme, which is quite difficult if you have a limited. When you have limited words, you actually
vocabulary.
Have your yes. Thank you.
No worries.
Excellent. To help me out with that word.
It was entirely appropriate.
Yeah, and I think that is something I struggle a lot with, because when I want to write lyrics for Landlord, usually I have two tabs in my browser open. That one is for translations and one is for rhymes, and that makes things very complicated, because when you have a rhyme that you think they fit, you'll have to find out if there are certain ways which change the meaning a bit. So I'm not always 100% sure if the rhyme I find is meaning the thing I mean.
I understand exactly what you mean. The English word you're probably looking for is connotation. The word has a specific connotation, as in what does it mean in this context?
Yes, exactly.
So I think then that actually gives us a structure for this conversation. So let's talk first about the act of writing lyrics, and then we can later on talk more about setting lyrics to music, if you're okay with that.
Totally.
Cool. If you've ever had a conversation with me about this stuff, you know that I like dividing things into pairs. And for lyrics, it's no different. I think I tend to divide lyrics into two categories in my head. One is when you're trying to tell a story or share information of some kind. And then the other is where you're more exploring a theme or emotion. Does that sound like I'm missing anything to you?
I'm not 100% sure I understand what exactly you mean.
Okay, well, so
Can you elaborate?
I'd love to. So let me give you two examples then. So first
Yes,
off,
please.
so I used to struggle with lyrics an awful lot back in the day when I was just starting out. And ever since I've come back, I don't know if it's because I'm older or I have more experience, but I do find that lyrics are much easier for me. Or at least, if I get stuck, I now have things I can try to help me proceed. So for something like when I wrote that ghost story, I knew I wanted to tell a story, so what writing the lyrics was basically taking a plot I'd already come up with and then figuring out details and then coming up with the correct words to set that into music. Whereas on the other hand, something like We'll Find a Way Back Home,
Mm-hmm.
it didn't have a specific plot or story in my head. What it was an attempt to convey this feeling of being lost but not giving up on finding your way back. So having that, I guess in my head, the idea of like a story is more, you're more locked into certain things. You have more restrictions, whereas when you're exploring something, you've got a bit more options or possibilities. I think that's where I was going with that. I don't know if that makes any more sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. It does. So it's more like, what's your starting point? Do you have something, some prepositions you'd like to follow, or is it something you explore as you go? I think usually you do have some guidelines that you'd like to follow. In case of your Find a Way song, it's the emotion you'd like to delve into. And in the ghost story, you had the story, obviously, which was set, and you just had to find the right words. So does that make it easier for you to write something like the ghost story, or is it more you'd like to explore as you go?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Which is easier? Which is easier? I think there's more planning involved for something like the ghost story where you're actually telling a story. But then once you've got that, you have more of a skeleton to build off of. So you're not coming up with things from scratch. Whereas for the other one, it was a lot more. It was a lot more open, which means that you don't have as much to sort of guide you. I knew I had a target I wanted to hit, but how exactly to do that, I didn't have as much guidance.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I'd have to say, if you do your planning right, then maybe the story thing is a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the funny thing is, one of my newest songs, "The Dream of Freedom," is a song which has both of those ways you just described. I have a part where I try to bring across an emotion. After a while, I figured I had to get the story going, and I'll have to move into something like a recitative style, and moving away from the pure emotional way of describing the feeling of loneliness.
Interesting.
And
Sorry, can I
get
jump
the
in for a second?
story across. Yeah, sure.
That's actually something from opera, for anyone not aware of it. Opera is divided into sort of two general categories of songs. There's arias, which almost are like a pause in the action where a character explores how they're feeling, they explain something. And then recitative is the part where it's a lot more speech-like, where people are going through more plot elements. I hadn't thought of that comparison.
Yeah, that was my actual thought when I was writing that. Let's go into the music.
Sure.
If you find with that, I did actually sing the lyrics. So if you can play that, I think that's easier for the audience to follow because they don't have to look up the actual lyrics.
All right, let's listen to your recording with your singing as well. Here we go.
Where are you? Where are you? Where are you? Where are you? Coming home. little fledgling, sit next to me. Lend me a feather, like you I dream to be free. Blood from my saw wound will serve me as the ink. Writing with your feather, that might come in a blink. Fly, little fledgling, my symbol of hope. Carry my message, free me of the rope. Where are they? Where are they? Will they come? Where are they? My last will to be told. The legend of Red Quill. They're coming.
I hadn't heard that before. That's really cool. Nicely done.
Thank you. Obviously, I'm no professional singer, so don't take that as a studio recording by a professional musician. But I felt inspired by Zeppel singing his Dream Drinker song, and I think it's easier to follow when you have the lyrics sung to it.
Yeah. As someone who's been doing this for so long, it's relatively easy for me to line up lyrics with notes as they're being played in Clanlord, but I know that it's definitely not the case for everybody. So it's really, really useful to have that.
Yeah, and also maybe not everybody listening has the lyrics. Maybe they're listening while driving or something like that.
Well,
so.
That'll be a bit of a problem for my stuff because I have not recorded anything.
Yeah, but your music is way more well known, and I think the lyrics are memorized better.
Just before you go into that, can I say a couple of things?
Yes, of course.
One thing that I really love about how you've structured this piece is that you've got so much space in the accompaniment. It's so sparse. There's little hints of guitar every so often, and every so often there is a longer passage, but there's lots of space, and that combines really well with the fact that you repeat the first line like 3 times in a row. It's
4 times even.
Probably. I lost count. But it's the same effect of you're musically and lyrically stuck in one place. You're stuck in a hole. It does such a great job of word painting, of really bringing it out. So, do you want to tell me something about how you wrote this? What do you want to say about it?
Yeah, I can.
Sure.
Actually, you got something that wasn't in my mind. The repeating of the first line, "Where are you?" 4 times is for me a sign of despair and of hopelessness, and asking, where is the rescue party? Why doesn't anybody come to help me? And repeating that over and over again because there is no answer. When I repeat this first line, "Where are you?" it is repeated, but also there is some kind of an echo in the guitar. And I switch the 2 notes. At first, it's F sharp and G. I start with, "Where are you?" That's where I start. And I repeat that. And then I come from the other side and play it the other way around. So that exclamation gives some more despair than just repeating the same melody line over and over again.
Mm-hmm. Can I jump in for just a second there?
Of course.
One thing that you've done that's really cool is you've emphasized this semitone movement. For anyone not aware, it's most of the music that we listen to only uses 1 or 2 semitones in the melody. For like the major scale, even the minor scale doesn't use it. But the way that you've used it here, like it's got such a longing quality. It's really, really effective. And then when you reverse it, The it's not quite a response. The person's still alone, but like you said, it's an echo. That's really cool.
Yeah, and this semitone really got me into a problem. I had to come up with a harmony to work with this semitone, and I really had to dig very deep. And I think in the end, I found something pretty nice that helps the cause with some real tension when the guitar plays this chord.
Crunchy. I like it.
Yeah. Actually, if I just leave the F sharp out of it, it sounds all right.
Mm-hmm.
That's totally fine. But the F sharp, which is in the melody, so I had to use it in some way, really gives it that crunchy feeling and the despair I wanted to convey.
Mm-hmm. It can be really challenging to convey that kind of emotion musically in a way that is still appealing to listen to. A lot of, especially modern composers, use really, really ugly sounds to try to explore despair. I like how you've chosen something where there is still so much tension in it, but it's never something that I feel like I don't want to listen to. It's still always appealing in like as a sound, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. And I'm happy that worked out, and you get the feeling I wanted to.
It's very effective. It's very effective.
Yeah, and maybe something else when we're talking about the accompaniment. The actual root note of the chord that it's an E minor chord. So the actual root note, the E, is not played by the melody until the very last "Where are you?" So the root is missing. You don't get to the point where there is some relief.
That's really cool. Let's take a second to look at the other part then. You said that the middle part is more sort of recitative style?
Yes, I had to get the story going. I had the story in my mind, I think, months ago, because you set this task for me. You wanted me to write something for Red Quill. And I came up with this storyline months ago. And I think I have 2 versions that I dismissed earlier. The main theme, the main story was the same as it is now, but it was a totally different style. It was more like I told the story in my previous versions. But starting with this emotional part gave me something to work with during the middle part. I could give the audience the place we are in and start from there. And I didn't have to tell the story from the get-go, but just have the emotion set the scene, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense, and it's very effective. I always talk about when you have music, there's either the sense of driving forward towards something or of being suspended in time, of being sort of like lost and floating. And you do a great job of doing the second, of feeling like the audience feels like, what's happening? Where are we going? And then eventually you do get there, so it's not a problem at all. If we never got out of floating, it would be a problem. But the way you do it works really well.
Yeah, the other problem I was facing was that I didn't have a narrator. So I have to get my points across to the audience while speaking as a lyrical self that knows the situation he or she is in. That was something I had some troubles doing, because the lyrical self obviously knows he or she is in a hole and knows the whole situation, but the listener doesn't. As a narrator, you can just tell the audience what's going on, but you can't do that as easily as a lyrical self.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense to me. It's always challenging to do this sort of a thing. Let's contrast that with the ghost story of mine that we were talking about earlier. I think we were talking about it earlier. Anyway, for the ghost story, it was very much someone telling a story, so it made perfect sense for someone to say everything that was going on, to speak from sort of an external viewpoint. But since this is someone talking about their own situation, most of the time, I wouldn't say something like, Chris turns to look at his laptop and prepares to hit the play button. Although that might make sense for a narrator. If I was speaking as, like you said, the lyrical self, it wouldn't make sense. So you're almost giving us information by little tiny drips, little drops one at a time, and making us wait for the final explanation that makes everything become clear.
Yeah. For example, I have that little fledgling, and I can't say, and he ripped a feather out of the fledgling. So I chose to ask the fledgling, lend me a feather. Please give it to me. I need it. So that was my way of bringing that point across, that the lyrical self gets a feather.
But not only that, but the way that you phrase it that way, it also shows the narrator's helplessness. It's, I'm stuck in this situation. All I can do is ask for help, even from a little bird passing by.
Yeah.
So it's one of those situations where I guess what might have been a necessity became a bonus.
Yeah, maybe you're right.
Cool. You got to remember to celebrate those little tiny things where it just happens to work out nicely.
Yeah, that happens more often than I expected.
I mean, that's kind of half of the fun, especially with lyrics for me writing these days. I find myself in that situation where I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to solve a problem, but by poking at it enough, a solution presents itself. Did you have anything else you wanted to say about this, or should we move on?
I think we can move on. I think that's one of the songs that has gotten the most polishing ever of any of my songs.
That's
I think
awesome.
I wrote on this for almost a month.
A whole month, wow. And it shows.
Yeah, not every day, but I came back to it, I think, every week, once or twice. Now it's a duet. At one point, it started out to become a trio, but I scrapped that.
That would have been interesting to do it as a duet from two different points of view. I don't know if it would have been more effective as a piece of music, but it's certainly an interesting idea to consider.
You mean as writing the view of the rescue party?
Or even from the fledgling's point of view. All right. Well, let's talk about one of my songs next then. Should I go more into my ghost story, or would you like to hear a bit more about writing lyrics for Find a Way Back Home?
I'd like to talk about the ghost story, because that's a song I haven't heard very often. And I'd love to find out more about it.
Sure. So just as a little bit of a background, I wrote this piece, was it 2020, 2021? One of those years. It was not that long after I came back to Clanlord. And I wanted to write something for... it was actually for one of the contests. We were doing monthly contests back then. I knew I wanted to write something and for Halloween, and thought a ghost story would be fun. The main issue was I had not heard a ghost story in many, many years. So a lot of it was trying to figure out what the heck am I going to do. And I basically just came back down to stereotypes. And the one that I could remember is at the end of the ghost story, the old storyteller always says, but some people still to this day remember, or like some people even to this day still say that, I don't know, like if you drive down this road, you can see someone with a hook for a hand or whatever it was. Yeah. So I knew I wanted to end with something like that. And that gave me the target that I wanted to hit. We were talking about that earlier. So everything after that was just trying to figure out what is this ending scene I want to get and how do I get there? So I don't really want to get too deeply into like the ideas of like script writing or writing stories. But once I had that goal in mind, I needed to plan out the entire story. I knew I wanted two people in Puddleby that would be normally invisible to the players. So when I was thinking about the Undine, the undead, I was thinking about that one that walks around with a big axe, and that made me think of a woodcutter. And then I thought, I mean, we run through the farms every day, but no one ever pays any attention to the farmers, so maybe a woodcutter and a farmer would be a nice pair. So once I had these two characters in mind, a story almost immediately started showing itself to me. The woodcutter going out, coming back to town and finding that things had gone horribly wrong. Once I had that, I knew I wanted to have some items to make the characters more memorable. So for the woodcutter, obviously the axe, and for the farmer, I couldn't think of what would be nice until I came across the idea of some clothing items. So in this case, the red scarf. And then once I had that, the whole story sort of came out in just like text and in prose, not poetry, not lyrics, anything like that. And then after that, I started to convert it into lyrics. And it was only after I had a fair amount of lyrics that I got any of the melody done.
So if you write this kind of lyrics, you start by writing the story without taking into account any poetry or anything else, just to get the story, the prosa down on a sheet of paper, and then you convert that into the lyrics.
Yeah, and when I say get the story down, I mean in a very skeletal form. It's sort of like Actually, I was thinking for movies how they do storyboarding, but that's even more specific than I'm thinking of. I just had an idea of the characters, I had an idea of the general outline of the story, and I had an idea of the ending. Once I had that, I started to experiment with writing down lyrics and found that it didn't necessarily flow from start to end. I'd like come up with a line that would fit good at the beginning and then come up with a line that would fit well later on, and then just started to fill in holes. But once I had at least like the first 2 lines, I started writing down the melody. And once I had an idea of the melody, it actually started to inform how I would structure the rest of the piece. Compare this to something like Find a Way Back Home, where I definitely started with all of the notes intact and it was fitting words to existing notes. This one was very much started with words and then adding notes to that. And then, halfway through it gets a little bit half and half, but I find for stories you sort of have to start with words first.
Yeah, that's interesting because it's completely different to what I've tried so far. Maybe I should try that as well and give it some more thought. I think that's quite a clever thing to approach this that way.
It can sometimes and sometimes not. I've found that, especially back before I took my long hiatus, I found that if I didn't have a good idea where the lyrics just like sort of naturally flowed out all in one go, I would get completely stuck and give up. If you really struggle with lyrics, it can be better to start with notes just so you have something to work off of. Again, limitations breed creativity. Like having a skeleton makes it so much easier. Anyway, let's take a second just to listen to the melody. I did something very similar to what you did in terms of giving lots of space. So this was actually where it started. So the lyrics that I came up with for the first few lines were, "Moonlight gleams on the axe of the woodcutter heading home." So this was trying to set up the fact that it's nighttime, that it's a woodcutter, and again, I'm trying to reference that axe as soon as possible. And here's the melody that I came up with for it. And I think I originally wrote this as, he stayed out way too late and it wasn't safe to be out any longer, something like that. So I didn't have any rhyme, I didn't have any particularly fancy language. That ended up being, he's tarried far too late. There's a nice fancy English word for you, tarried. He's tarried far too late, and this is not the time to roam. So for that one, I knew I wanted the melody to go a bit higher, and let's just take a listen. I think what makes the piece work is that last note just before the final A, where it dips down underneath. Anyway, so I knew at that point that I needed to have some sort of accompaniment. I think originally I had planned to have it as a trio, and then I realized that in terms of, it was getting way too long. In terms of like the character limit, there's no possible way. So I decided to do 2 guitars and 1 flute. And then the guitars play one after another, and it just sounds like one, but technically it's 2. Anyway, so with the accompaniment, it sounds more like this. Moonlight gleams on the axe of the woodcutter heading home. He's tarried far too long, and this is not the time to roam. So that little harp, actually it's harp, not guitar, but that little tiny flick there in harp, as soon as I had that, I had the accompaniment for the entire piece planned out in my head.
Yeah.
If you get one good idea, that's all you need.
Yeah, it's iconic.
And I know I wanted to repeat it, and then the last time. So I didn't keep going with that amount of space that you had. For this one, I really, really enjoyed that really, really low bass line. Dun, 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 dun. Combined with the weird, twisty accompaniment. But anyway, getting back to the lyrics, a lot of it's trying to tell the story. So let's see. Through forests and fields he walks, wary of the night, and of creatures lurking in shadows, hidden from his sight. So that part was designed to be almost exactly the same melody, basically strophic, like verses. So, and a straight repetition would probably be too boring. But if I repeat it with accompaniment this time, then it's okay. So at this point, I knew I wanted a contrasting section. And for there, I knew I wanted to go to major, so I figured I had to have something that was a bit more positive in terms of the outlook. So what could I do? I figured this could be him telling his friends about how great things were. He's got this fiancée that he's really looking to marry, or, girlfriend, whatever. He's going to try and get a ring or something, and then introduces her red scarf. So unfortunately, my voice is killing me, so I don't think I can sing today, but let's see it. Today's a special day, he'd bragged, before he left that morn. By evening, I'll be the happiest man that ever in this world was born. So this is actually, sort of like you were saying with the narrative self, this is him stopping the story. The narrator's speaking as the woodcutter, him doing the aria sort of thing of explaining where he's at. What else does he say? The fair maid that I love, more beautiful than the sun. She waits for the ring that will make us one. Again, trying to set up the relationship, but also the fact that it's been going on for a while, that they're hoping to happen next. I think the thing I'm most proud of about this piece is that it's very efficient in terms of narrative information per word used.
Mm-hmm.
Every single line or a couple of lines is trying to introduce not just one idea, but two, or introduce an idea and also sort of how to feel about it. And that took a lot of tweaking. Back when I started, I wrote lyrics in one day. I just write whatever and it was done, and I'd never look at it again. For this one, like you said, I looked at it for a month. It was about a month of, and like you said, not looking at it every day, but probably thinking about it every day, even just a couple of times. So.
Yeah, sometimes those processes take a lot of time to make them really work, make them almost perfect. And I see where you're coming from, because it was the same for me. I did write the Hey Dear Stranger. The lyrics for that were simple. I didn't know where I wanted to go. I didn't know what theme was, and I just wrote them. I didn't give them a second thought or a third thought even. Interesting that you got the same path in your development.
I actually think that's fairly common. I mean, it happens with music too. When people are starting out, they'll just write whatever and it's good enough. But the more experience you have, the higher your standards get. And you've heard me say before, and I'll say it a million times before, perfect is the opposite of done. Oftentimes when you're writing something, it just needs to be good enough, and then we move on to something else. But the more you learn, the more you do, the higher the standard of your good enough gets. So sometimes, you have to do more revisions. Plus also, the more you know, the more you can revise stuff, because you have either strategies or, I guess, the more that you have strategies that can help you out with that.
Yeah, also, I think you want to accomplish more. You want to do more than you did before. You want to evolve as a musician or as a lyric writer. At least that's something I want to do. At some point, you can't stick with things you wrote within a day. Because there wouldn't be much improvement. That can happen from time to time, but I don't think it's the standard.
Yeah, you're very lucky when something just comes out fully formed. Doesn't happen nearly as often as we wish it does.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It just happens to settle with Dream Drinker.
Oh, jeez. That piece, man. Why did you bring that up? I'm so jealous you wrote that.
Now we both can feel insignificant.
Okay. All right. I already do. Anyway, I don't want to say too much more about the ghost story because it's about like 7 or 8 minutes long. It's pretty long for a piece. But just a couple other things. Once I had the idea for the contrasting sections, and then I had the transition out of it back into the main section. Oh, I don't think I played that. Yeah, so this is the start of it. Happiest man that ever in this world was born. And then this part is actually really neat because it sort of pulls everything down and it's building back up again. It's like he's sharing secrets. For the fair maid that I love, more beautiful than the sun, she waits for the ring that will make us one. And then 4 months I've saved to have enough to buy one that's just right, that matches her favorite red scarf. And then I slow it down here, and her hair as black as night. So slowing it down there moved away from this happiness back to this sense of like ominous foreboding, which of course the color black is also associated with, even though, you know, he's still talking about the woman he loves.
When you went to that second part, I'll just call it B,
Sure.
B part, where you changed the emotion to something hopeful. You go into major, which is something I did as well for the Dream of Freedom, where I end up on a major chord because they are coming and there is some hope.
Mm-hmm. That is a really nice little touch at the end. I like that a lot.
I really like painting with music to support the lyrics. You did that quite nicely there. It really fits, and you move seamlessly between those emotional parts, which are completely the opposite of each other.
Mm-hmm. But now that I had that, it actually became a limitation that was a little bit challenging, because the next part of the story is the woodcutter going back to town, getting the ring, and then finding out that the Feast of Cyrano had already started. There's the undead are coming back, and it's very dangerous. But there was this major section. The structure of the song meant that there had to be a major section. So that forced me to put in a little part where, no, you know what? Things are actually getting better again. It looks like he is going to make it back to the farm, and it'll be fine. Which, of course, means that it's the perfect time for me to cut it off. And then you give them some hope and take it away. But speaking specifically about taking it away, that major section actually comes back a third time, but it's twisted. Let me see if I can skip forward to it. All right, so this, you can hear it's the same melody, but now it's got this diminished harmony. So it's like this twisted version of the hope we had earlier.
That's great.
Mm-hmm. When I figured this out, I got to feel pretty clever.
And you should.
And then this part again was major. Oh. And in this case, rather than repeating that melody that goes upwards again, in this case the melody keeps creeping upwards and upwards to increase the tension. It's still the same accompaniment as before. It's being repeated 3 or 4 times in total, I think, but every single time the melody gets higher and higher and higher. The last thing that he saw, and then of course this part, when I heard that, I knew I had to end there, and then before any music could come back, it had to be spoken. Let's see. And so he turned to face his fate, and the last thing that he saw was, and then this part is spoken, an Undine with raven hair, a red scarf, and a hungry maw. Oh, he got killed by his love. Wow. And then there's this nice big pause, and then eventually comes back. One thing I love about music is that you can set up expectations in the audience and then use those expectations to make them feel certain things. If something was originally minor, you can bring it back as major so that it gives a sense of hope, like you did at the end of Dream of Freedom. In this case, I took this major section and created this horrible, twisted, diminished thing to take that hope and pervert it, to take it all away, as is appropriate for a ghost story. Anyway.
Yeah, that's a really cool part.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, we've been talking for quite a while, and we've only talked about 2 tunes. Why don't we talk about one last one very quickly? The ghost story was, I think, the first piece I wrote with lyrics after coming back to Clanlord, and I'm really, really proud of the way it turned out. But I think we need a little bit of a palate cleanser before we end, so let's end with something ridiculous and silly, which is, I want to talk just a little bit about setting lyrics that exist to music. Let's talk about the Laughing Academy.
Oh, yeah. That's a cool song.
All right. So for anyone who hasn't heard this one before, it starts like this. So I had that intro just sitting on my computer waiting for the right spot to use it in. And then I made it's not even a contest. I put this sort of like creative festival together where I asked people to write lyrics or poems. And then I asked bards to pick a poem to set to music. And that was my second choice. My first choice was by a clanmate. So, come on, clan solidarity. I had to choose Kanis. But I really wanted to do this one because it was hilarious. Let's take a listen to it just quickly. Here we go. This is The Laughing Academy. There's no way I can sing this, I don't think. But maybe I'll try just for fun.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's take a listen to it. Here is the lyrics I wrote for Inu's poem. We'll have lyrics down in the description, I hope. Here we see. Anyway, here you go. So that was it's in verse form. It's 3 verses that are almost exactly the same. Oh my gosh, this was so much fun to write.
I can't imagine.
Let's take something that's very normal, blues form. Let's do that sort of like bum, 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 and just add a bunch of wrong notes to it. Those semitones you had earlier, we got them here too.
Yeah.
Anyway, so this was really, really fun to write. Inu's lyrics were sort of like a free verse poem, so I ended up adapting them quite a bit to fit the vision that I had for the piece. She'd written a chorus for the piece that featured the line, happy, 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 joy, joy. And I couldn't get the happy, happy, joy, joy song from that old cartoon Ren and Stimpy out of my head. So I had to come up with something else. Otherwise, I'd just be completely stuck. I could not get it out. So I actually ended up using half of the second verse that she wrote as the chorus because I just thought it was super catchy. We're falling in the mountains, falling in the river, falling everywhere that we go. Sounds like fun to me. Anyway.
Sounds like LA.
Yep, pretty much. If I was not in Red Quill, that's probably where I'd be. I'm a very silly person. Anyway, the verse is actually almost in the blues form in terms of the chords. It's just 1 and then 4 and then 5. Although I have that like chromatic walk up at the end that's just fun. Once I had that, I knew I was sort of locked in and I just wanted to use it again. Although the second verse, unfortunately, I'd used the first half for the chorus. So what am I going to do? What if I just repeat a line and just pretend that I've gotten distracted and forgot that I sang it? That sounds like fun.
Yeah.
So let me see if I can skip ahead to that part. Next week, we'll just rinse and repeat. Ooh, something shiny. Next week is all just rinse and repeat. Wait, I already sang that part? Anyway, I had so much fun.
Yeah.
It's a lot of this is just like, how can you write a piece that's musically satisfying, but at the same time does not take itself serious in the slightest? It was fun to do.
I can't imagine.
Anyway.
That's cool.
But this is one of those ones where there wasn't really a story. It was very much sort of just exploring a emotion, exploring a feeling. And once I figured out how I wanted to do that, it was just a matter of keeping it going. One little tiny side note, though. Originally, the transitions between the choruses or between the verses were different. But I was over the character limit and something had to go. So rather than getting rid of something fun from the actual main parts of the chorus or the verse, I took out the transitions. But, these are the sacrifices you have to make sometimes.
It works fine.
Mm-hmm.
As the whole theme of the song isn't about structure or being perfect, actually, there is a lot of imperfections, which are planned imperfections. You broke any rule in the book musically. So I think that having no transitions is actually totally fine here.
Mm-hmm. It worked out well. I figured out a way to make it work. I was a little cranky at first, but, we figured these things out.
Do you have the version with the transitions?
You know what? I'll see if I can dig it out.
Because I would love to hear that.
Yeah, I do. Here's what ended up happening. This was the final version that got turned into music for Clanlord. So here's the last part of the chorus. That's all I could use there. Those 3 notes. That's what I ended up using. Here's what the original was before I had to take those parts out. Actually, I think I kept that one and I just shuffled it later.
Yeah, or you tweak it a little bit.
That's what it was.
Sounds familiar?
I originally wanted to reuse the opening at the end there. I wanted to have the whole intro there, but I couldn't, so I shortened it to just those few notes. And that one sounds very familiar because I'm pretty sure I left that in, but just the 3 chords. Here's what ended up being used in the final version. Yeah, it was one of those things where you have to get rid of something, and just taking out that intro section again, it was simple, it was easy. Nobody would even notice it was gone except for me. So, deep in my heart, I want longer transitions. Anyway, that's all that I really wanted to talk about in terms of lyrics today. Obviously, there's more, but we're way over time. So, perhaps we should leave it there.
Yeah, and maybe we come back, but I think we have to come back to every single topic we discuss. Maybe we should do some overtime extended version someday and talk about the things we prepared and never talked about.
Oh, wait, hang on. There was one last thing I wanted to talk about, which is pretty important. It has to do with lining up lyrics with music. In English, and in every language, you have stressed syllables. Syllables, as opposed to syllables. It sounds very weird if you put the emphasis on the wrong syllable. But when you're using a word as lyrics in music, you also want to line up the emphasis on the words, the stressed syllables in the words, with the stressed beats in the rhythm. So, for instance, in 4/4 time, beat 1 is important. Beat 3 is also kind of important. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. If you were to put a stressed syllable that's out of sync with the rhythmic stresses, it can sound weird. Now, again, sometimes that's very effective. Maybe it's exactly what you want. But usually, it's not the best choice. I don't know if that's something that necessarily you've thought about a whole lot, as English is not your first language, but it can come up.
Yeah, being an amateur singer, I think that's something you learn while singing and performing music. I think that's nothing I specifically thought about, but came to me naturally over time, I'd say. I guess it's the same in German and any other language.
Yeah, probably. I wish I knew more German to be able to give you an example in there, but I can barely give you an example in English.
Yeah, but actually also interesting is the choir in which I sing. We do sing in different languages. For the last concert we had Swahili as a language as well. So there are common things for every language, and every language has its own way of pronouncing stuff. Singing in Latin or in Italian is different from singing in German.
Yeah, very.
But not when we talk about emphasizing 1 and 3 in a 4/4 signature.
Writing music for Clanlord with lyrics specifically is a challenge. I mean, not just in terms of writing the lyrics or, in making the lyrics appear above your character when you're actually in-game performing, but making it clear how to line up the words with the music being played when there isn't actually someone singing adds another layer of complexity to it that, I mean, it's a challenge, but it's also kind of fun too. So it's been fun for me to write more stuff with lyrics recently.
Yeah, I have some ideas floating around my head, but so far any attempts to write lyrics to the ideas were unsuccessful, I'd say.
Fair enough. I've been having a bit of a dry spell myself as well. I've got several ideas that I'm sort of poking around with slowly, but nothing's anywhere close to finished yet.
Yeah, I've been thinking about doing a collaboration with someone else, some native speaker. So I give the idea and the main outlines, just like you did with the contest or the festival with the poems. And have someone else write the lyrics for me and then try to make something out of that.
I really like that. It's a lot of fun to do. If you can find someone to work with, I highly recommend it.
I'll try. Maybe if someone is interested, hit me up.
Sounds like fun. All right. I think that's about all I have to say about on this topic.
Great. How long have we been talking now?
Oh, more than an hour, I bet.
All right. Yeah, then maybe we should keep the rest for the next episode.
Sounds good. All right. Well, thank you very much for talking with me about this. It's interesting. I feel very comfortable talking about music-related stuff, but with lyrics, it's not my area of expertise. So I hope, it was still a useful conversation for everyone.
Hope so too. And thank you for your time and for the effort.
Indeed. Well, once again, I'm Chris as Coriakin, and with me as always is
Sammy as Bingro.
Thank you very much. Have a lovely night, Aaron. Bye.
You too. Bye.
And once I had
bloody vermin.
Yeah, bloody vermin. Who's that? Tesa? Okay. Anyway. Okay, that got me. That was really funny, actually. Calm down.